right, gentlemen, to wrap up today's show, to wrap up RTCF, we are going to talk about college quarterbacks across the country. And this is an interesting year in college football because there's a lot of Power 4 programs that are going to be having new quarterbacks under center. Kind of the same narrative of last year, but a little bit different because a lot of programs are kind of going with some homegrown kids. Ohio State last year dipped into the portal. Notre Dame dipped into the portal. And both of those teams made it to the national championship. Now programs like that are going with more homegrown kids, people that they've developed themselves. And so what Brian did is he put together a list of the top 10 first-year quarterbacks heading into the 2025 season. But before we dive into that, Brian, because there's some quarterbacks in there that it's interesting, because you have Dante Moore, who started 2 years ago at UCLA, but now is going to step in full-time as Oregon's guy. So walk us through what the criteria is for this list.
Yeah, so Sean and I have been having some fun. We've been wanting to do this one for a while, and Trev, and I'll talk more about why we want to do it in a second. But to answer your question, the criteria is basically: are you a true first-year starter? What does it mean to be a true first-year starter? That means you were not an injury fill-in for a few games. We kind of did a cutoff of 3 to 4 games. There are some guys that stepped in for injuries early. You could look at a Marcel Reed, who didn't take over till halfway through the season, but then became the guy the rest of the year. You look at Dante Moore, who started, I think, 5 or 6 games as a freshman, but he was the starter and then got banged up and then came back and started again and then transferred. So he's a first-year starter at Oregon, but he's not a first-year starter. What makes this group unique is these are guys that have never really been starters before. And never again, we'll have a quarterback on this list that Notre Dame fans are very familiar with, who has started a bowl game before. Well, that's different than being your starting quarterback. That just means you filled in for a game. It doesn't mean you were the guy. And so really it's trying to look at the first time, first quarterbacks who for the first time are the guy. They are the starter. It doesn't mean it doesn't have to be a guy that's never played or started a game before. So, for example, we will talk about Arch Manning. He has 2 career starts, but he wasn't the starter. He just filled in for an injured quarterback for 2 games, knowing he was going to come out of the starting lineup when that guy was done. And so that's really what it comes down to, because it is a very interesting dynamic, guys, because it is a year where so many big-time programs, when you guys look at the top 4 schools on our list, it's boy, those are teams that you're expecting to compete for a championship this year, and they're going with a first-time starting quarterback. And so I just think that adds to some of the interest and excitement about the season. And Sean, Trev, you and I made a comment when we were doing our show about the top 10 quarterbacks. And Sean, I wish you could have been a part of that show. It was a lot of fun, although you and I talked a lot about quarterbacks when the offseason started. But one of the things that's so unique about this season, Trevor, is, there's some talented guys at the top of that board, but a comment that we made is a lot of the most talented quarterbacks are guys that we don't really know a lot about yet, or guys that are first-year starters that are going to have a lot to prove. But, man, some of the best talent is in the younger classes, and we're going to see that this year in a big way, guys. We're going to see some really talented young quarterbacks, and I'm all for it. I can't wait to see it, because I thought quarterback play this past year was down overall in college football. I didn't think it was a great year for college quarterbacks, but you could see this coming because you knew who was redshirting. You knew who was kind of taking their lumps as first-year starters. You knew the DJ Lagways and the guys like that. Michael Van Buren, who's now going to sit out a year at LSU and probably take over next year, but you saw the future's bright with that kid, even though right now he's taking his lumps for a bad Mississippi State team. And it got you kind of fired up about the future of the position, because there has been a couple down years of the position, guys. I mean, you had some stars, some guys coming, you had the CJ Strouds, the Drake Mays, Bryce Youngs, but there was a big drop-off, I felt, with some of the top guys in that group of players. And now you're seeing to where there's a chance to be some really great depth at the quarterback position and some really talented young players that we're going to be looking forward to. So these are first-year starters, top 10 first-year starters. Doesn't have to be a freshman or redshirt freshman. It could be a senior. And there actually is a couple older guys. But I'm ready to get into this. And here's what we're going to do. We have one list, the IB list, but we're going to talk about some guys that who we like. Sean, I know, had a list. He'll talk about where his guys were on his list as we go through this. And then at the end, we're also going to talk about some guys who didn't make the list that we have our eye on too. So I'm looking forward to it. You guys ready to go? Ready to rock and roll?
Always.
All right. Well, it's kind of funny, Trev. You mentioned something last week. I'm not a very big PJ Fleck fan. You know this. Everybody knows this. Haven't hide it. I'm still not hiding it. But I keep talking about PJ Fleck's team this offseason, and it's because I call them like I see them. No matter how I feel about you. And I like some things that they're doing at Minnesota. And they've got a young quarterback that's stepping in the lineup this year, guys, who's a redshirt freshman named Drake Lindsey. He is the reason Zach Pyron transferred out of Minnesota after the spring. Remember him? He started against Notre Dame last year. Georgia Tech, talented quarterback from Alabama, transferred to Minnesota. Was supposed to kind of step in and be the guy, but got outplayed and beat out by Drake Lindsey this spring. Big old kid, 6'4", 6'5", 230, little bit slow-footed, which is my big concern with him. He doesn't have great feet, but if they can protect him, he's got a big arm. He only threw 5 passes last year, played a little bit in a bowl game, but this kid's, guys, this is a bit of a throwback pocket passer, Sean, as I'm talking about his big arm. I see you shaking your head. Yep. This is an old school quarterback right here, Sean. This is the guy that you and I grew up as kids in the 80s and 90s. That's 6'5", 230, not a great athlete, but an absolute howitzer is connected to his right shoulder. And that's what Drake Lindsey could be. You look at his high school film, he seems to read defenses pretty well. It's very impressive arm talent. Even in high school, he's throwing 60-yard bombs, hitting guys on the run. I think this kid, if they can protect him this year, if the O-line can play better than it did last year, this kid has a chance to emerge as an up-and-coming stud in the Big Ten.
And it seems like those are the type of quarterbacks they like at Minnesota. It might have something to do with the inclement weather, playing the majority of your games in tough wind and tough conditions, one the big strapping quarterback with a bazooka on his right shoulder. But, yeah, that's what he is. Probably, like you said, more cement-footed than the
real
other
heavy
quarterbacks
feet.
He's had.
Yeah, real heavy feet.
Yeah, but arm talent is bananas. And they have a really good young wide receiver core that was coming on as the season progressed, that I think he's going to have a chance to work with and produce. Yeah, because people have them in the 4 or 5 range, 4 or 5, 6 range in the Big Ten early predictions. So he'll go a long way to whether or not they can meet those expectations or exceed those expectations.
He's a kid that I have at 10 now. I wanted to put him higher, but he could also fall off if the offensive line can't take care of him. But you want to know what he looks athletically a lot like Jack Cohn. Like, you're just going to need to protect him and keep him in the pocket. But the arm talent is elite. I could see him going up on this list, but it's going to be dependent upon him getting comfortable in the system. It is a pretty easy system to run in. And we did a show, Sean, last week where Trevor and I ranked our top 10 backfields, and we have Minnesota in the top 10. I had him 6th. So you don't need him to come in and sling it around 40 times a game. You're going to be able to break him in slowly. We're going to see some fun throws from Drake Lindsey this year. My number 9 guy, I had a little bit of a tough time with because I'm not overly high on him overall as a quarterback, but Bo Prabula at Missouri. I think here's why I have him on my list. I know more about him than some of the other kids who are not on my list. I've seen him play. I know what he can do. I know his strengths and his weaknesses. And I think he's playing in a system at Missouri that's going to be favorable to his skill set. And so I have him on this list. If he was going to change this list, I would assume he goes down. And there's about 4 or 5 other young kids that I just couldn't put on this list because I was a little uncertain of where they are. But I do think Bo Prabula brings an element that Missouri would like to have. We saw him with the quarterback they had the last couple of years with Cook. They would have him run. I think Bo Prabula is a much better runner than the kid they had the last couple of years. I just think that Brady Cook, but I think that the question for Bo Prabula and where he's going to kind of answer some of if he's going to be as good as people think he is and not what I think he is, he's got to become a better passer. But when I look at Missouri and what they tried to do the last couple of years with Brady Cook, they tried to run him more. He just wasn't like an elite athlete. I think Bo Perbula can fit that system very well. Like if Notre Dame was looking for the next Riley Leonard and they didn't really care about someone developing as a passer, I'd say this is a kid you should look at. But because we know he can run. I mean, he ran for 242 yards last year, 6.4 yards per carry, ran for 329, 5.9 yards per carry, and 6 touchdowns a year before. My question is, though, is what kind of passer is he? And that's, that's what it's going to kind of come down to. Last year he played the most he played against was Wisconsin. He went 11 of 13, threw for 98 yards and a touchdown. After that, his next highest attempts was 9. He went 6 of 9 against Kent State with a touchdown, 83 yards, a touchdown, and a pick. He hasn't done anything other than really mop-up duty in his career, and outside of Wisconsin last year. And he struggled to throw the ball down the field against Wisconsin. I mean, the numbers look good. He went 11 of 13, but it was all quick stuff. It just didn't show. So can he learn that? We'll find out. But he's at the very least going to bring you a dynamic running aspect to this. If he can throw the ball effectively, doesn't have to be a great thrower, but just effectively, then he could go up this list.
Really good physical skills. Like you said, the fit of what he can do and how it fits into what they asked Brady Cook to do, and that he has better physical attributes, can probably be more impactful in the run game with Missouri. I do wonder about the transition and whether or not his passing game, specifically vertically, can improve and be impactful for Missouri, especially against SEC defenses that will shrink you. If that's all you can do is the short to intermediate, eventually, they'll take the running game away from you as the quarterback keep. So what's going to be his counter? What's going to be his answer? And I'm going to be patient with him, because I believe any quarterback transferring into a different system, a different situation, no matter the fit, it takes that second year before you really start to see the full manifestation of who they are in that system. And so my expectation would be Bo Perbula, year 2 in Missouri, is probably going to be a far better quarterback than Bo Perbula in year 1. That's my prediction. So I'm not going to just say what he can't be in year 1, but I think he's going to be a better version of himself in the second year in the system at Missouri.
So there's 2 guys on my list, or 2 teams on my list that have a quarterback that Notre Dame is going to face this year. And the first one comes up here in my number 8 spot, guys, and that is Ryan Brown from Purdue. I think one of the things that got Ryan Walters, there's a lot of things that got Ryan Walters fired. One of the things that got him fired was not being smart enough to make a coaching change in the middle of the season. Purdue is 1-4. They got blown out by Notre Dame. They got blown out by Oregon State, got whooped by Nebraska, and got blown out by Wisconsin. The next week, I think it was related to an injury to Hudson Card, but they started Ryan Brown, or Ryan Brown played the majority of that game. He goes 18 of 26 for 297 yards, 3 touchdowns against Illinois in a game that they lost 50-49. In that game, he also rushed for 118 yards. And they did not ride him the rest of the year. He was not as good the next week against Oregon. Did play the next week against Oregon with 9 of 19 for 93 yards, rushed for 48 yards. But the writing was on the wall, guys. Hudson Card was not the fit for you. Your team around him was bad. You had a kid that could run, a kid that could throw, and I understand why Ryan Brown transferred in the offseason. Then he came back, and he performed pretty well. So this is a first-year starter that I think with the new offense, new players around him, is a guy to watch because he can run. He's a guy that can do damage with his legs. He doesn't have to just sit in the pocket. I don't know about the talent around him, but I think this kid's got a chance to be a pretty good quarterback this season for Purdue. Not like an all Big Ten guy, but you look at it and you're like, why was Purdue more improved this year? Well, they had that kid over there making plays at quarterback and Ryan Brown. If you go back and just watch the game against Illinois, you're thinking, boy, Purdue's got a pretty good quarterback. And then you realize that's not their starter. You're like, oh, that was probably a mistake. Like, who was their starter? Like Drew Brees' kid? Like, I mean, I just never understood why he did that, Sean, and I think it cost him. And fortunately, they were able to get him back from North Carolina this spring. Because it was weird. He transferred to North Carolina in January, and then the coaching change happened, and then he transfers back to Purdue in the spring. And I think that was huge for Purdue to get him back.
Yeah, it's just funny that you being my guy, you would reference a game that had me throwing many things at the TV screen. Because I'm expecting, I watched them get killed by Notre Dame. They're facing my Illini, and I'm sitting there and I'm saying, who in the heck is this dude? What? Why can't we tackle him? Tackle him. What is going on? Why is he hitting? Why are these people open? And all of a sudden, they just look like a totally different team. They still couldn't stop a cold on defense. So that wasn't different. But all of a sudden, this Purdue offense and the talent they had a great tight end. They had a really solid group of running backs. And all of a sudden, they were looking good because this kid and his talents and his moxie. Mm-hmm. This is a tough kid, man, with great moxie. I can't tell you how many 3rd and 7 or more moments he converted to extend drives, and the way he was solid in the red zone. Like, they lost that game because of a 2-point conversion. What? They lost that game because Illinois converted and they didn't. And the game was finally over and I could just exhale. But he gave me one of the worst college football viewing experiences I've had as an Illinois fan. It was just like, who is this kid? They went and got him off the street. You haven't heard about him. You're happy because he's quarterbacking. He doesn't look like your traditional big talented quarterback. He's just like a wiry kid just out there. He's just making plays. He's just time after time making plays. Oh, we got him at 3rd and 8. He makes a play. Oh man, we stopped him. We got him at 4th and 3 right now. They're leaving him on the field. He makes a play. It's just so, yes, I'm excited to watch him play against Notre Dame's defense, because I saw him against, a middle of the road, young but growing Illinois defense. And like you said, when he faced Oregon the next week against a better defense, he struggled a little bit more. But I'm ready to see how he matches up against Notre Dame's defense and his maturity at Purdue and being the leader. They know this is our guy. So I'm waiting to see how that matches up, but I'm excited to see how he grows as a quarterback as well throughout the Big Ten schedule.
Next on my list, Trevor's going to love this one. I got whoever wins the battle at Syracuse, and it's between Steve Angeli and Ricky Collins. And look, I like both of those players. I think Steve Angeli's a veteran, tough kid, great leader. Sean, you mentioned the word moxie. He has a lot of moxie. I don't think Steve has elite arm talent. That's why he was never going to start at Notre Dame. But he showed in a bowl game against Oregon State that this is a kid that is a Division I, Power 5 starting quarterback. And then Ricky Collins, I think, has more physical tools. I think Ricky has a great arm, and he's a good athlete. I loved him out of high school. Notre Dame actually recruited him for a little bit, and then they settled in. They ended up getting Kenny Minchie in that class. So it worked out pretty well. They focused on Dante. And then by that point in time, Ricky was kind of off the board. Then when they, Tommy Rees also loved Kenny Minchie. So they went to him. And then the kid that was looking at Oregon and Kenny wasn't interested. And then Kenny eventually came back to Notre Dame and up in the class. So Notre Dame got a heck of a quarterback. But I loved Ricky coming out of high school in Louisiana. Went to LSU. Was never really going to get a shot there. Transferred to Syracuse this offseason. Got hurt, I think in the spring game or late in the spring, hurt his hand. So I don't know if that factored into the decision. But basically, those two kids are going to battle for the job, and whoever wins it, I think, is going to have a really good year because, number one, it's a system generated towards the quarterback putting up a lot of numbers. That's just the reality of it. And while I don't think they're going to be as talented as they were last year, they're still going to have solid, good talent around them. They've got a receiver that was, I think, 4th or 5th on the team last year that was a big play guy that's going to kind of step up into a bigger role. You got Jonte Cook transferring in. So there's a lot of guys on there, but when I look at this group, I think these guys at Syracuse are going to have a shot to be productive, and I do think Trev. I just have a hard time thinking Angeli transferred there if he didn't have a pretty good idea he was going to start. But if he does start, great. If Ricky eventually comes in, or vice versa, or if one of these guys just wins a job and has the job, I think they're going to perform. I think they're going to put up numbers. I don't know how good the team is going to be. But I think these guys are going to be solid quarterbacks no matter who starts. So that's why I have Trev, I have Angeli and Ricky Collins on my list. I just think the system alone is going to allow them to produce. But I also think both of these kids have, because it's not just about numbers, I think both these kids have some level of ability as well.
Oh, yeah, and to your point, we've seen what Steve Angeli can do in big game situations as well. And I think him going to an offensive system like Syracuse is going to help him put up a lot of numbers. I don't know if Syracuse is going to be a playoff team, let alone an ACC championship contender team, but the quarterback's going to put up a lot of numbers. And Steve is a quarterback that has the tools to do that in the right system, for sure. So totally understand why they're on the list. And then Ricky Collins, again, super high ceiling kid. I'm with you. I got to imagine that Steve would have some grasp on his level of ability to win this competition before leaving a quarterback room with an ongoing competition and then transferring to another school to be a part of another quarterback competition. So, yeah, I get it.
Number 6 on my list is Gunnar Stockton. Sean, I had a tough time placing Gunnar because I could make a case for him being a little lower on the list, but I could even make an even better case for him to maybe even be higher on the list. And part of my issue with him is just the system around him concerns me. But if I were to guess, if you were to say, okay, Brian, here's one thing I guarantee, he won't be 6th. Where do you think he'll be? I'd say, okay, that means he probably had a really good year and he's higher, right? That would be my guess. Because I like Gunnar. He's not your traditional pocket passer. He's not a dynamic Jaden Daniels, Riley Leonard type of athlete. He's kind of in between on all of them. But you know what I like about the kid? He plays like a kid named Gunnar Stockton plays. He's just a tough, battle. He's going to battle you. He's going to go out there and make plays. I mean, the poise he showed last year coming off the bench against Texas, and he came out against Notre Dame. Didn't he start something like 7 of 7 against Notre Dame and just was throwing the ball down the field? This kid showed no fear against Texas or Notre Dame last year. And he earned a lot of respect for me. And he's not a sexy quarterback. He doesn't have like that big arm. He's not, he just is a playmaker. I just think the kid plays. And I think he'll have, I think there's a little too much hype about the Georgia receiving core nationally. But the one thing that I will say, and Sean, I'm curious your thoughts on this. I definitely think the receiving core at Texas is going to be better, or Georgia's going to be better than it was a year ago. I still don't think it's going to be elite. You get Dylan Bell coming back. You had Noah Thomas. You've got Zachariah Branch, who's a good player, but maybe not the elite player people thought he was going to be. But you also have one of the best tight end tandems coming back in college football too. And you have a running back room that Trev and I both ranked as a top 10 unit for next year. So I like Gunnar. I think he's kind of he reminds me a lot of like Jake Fromm. They're different style of player, but what I mean is, no, he's not going to be a future first-round NFL draft pick, but that kid knows how to play. That kid knows how to win. That's really the big reason I even have any optimism about Georgia being a SEC title contenders, because I think Gunnar Stockton is more suited to the personality of who Georgia should be than what Carson Beck was. Carson Beck looked way better at the 7-on-7 tournament, but as far as I never felt Carson Beck had the character and demeanor that fit who Kirby Smart wants his football team to be. Gunnar Stockton does. He's got a little bit of Stetson Bennett in him. He's got a little bit of Jake Fromm in him. And that's what I really like about Gunnar Stockton. That's why I have him at 6 and why I feel like I may be undervaluing him even at number 6, Sean.
I love the connection between the 3 Georgia quarterbacks that you mentioned, because I think the similarity between them all, they had an ability that when a play was needed, they could make it. And I think that was the question about Carson Beck. He could make a play, but then he could kill you with a play in those moments as well. He could get you 7 in those moments, and then he could give the other team 7 in those moments. And a program like Georgia, we've said it all the time, they're a program built on not beating themselves. We're going to be tough. We're going to dominate the line of scrimmage. We're not going to beat ourselves, and we're going to wear the other team down physically. That is the core and the crust of that program. They've never designed it to have the 5-star quarterback. It's different. It's built differently than Clemson. Clemson's program was built on having that dynamic quarterback. That's when they were at their peak, when they had the dynamic quarterback. Georgia is not saying that they don't want dynamic quarterbacks, because honestly, Fromm only got in because that 5-star got injured. They had a 5-star with a big arm that was supposed to be their starter. And Jake Fromm ended up being the better fit for what they wanted to do as a program, as a team, for them to win games. And so Gunnar Stockton fits that mold. Like you said, he wasn't the problem against Notre Dame.
No.
From how I viewed the game, he wasn't
Agreed.
the problem. There are a lot of other problems on that offensive front. There were bigger issues than Gunnar Stockton. And so I think there is a step back in a familiarity for that staff to have a guy like Gunnar Stockton at the helm. I want to see what type of leader he is. Is he going to end up being the type of leader that Stetson Bennett was, that Jake Fromm was? And is he going to have that knack for the big play in key moments in big games that looking at that schedule that Georgia has, he's going to have a chance to show right out the gate, who are you against stiff competition? And so I think he could definitely climb the list and be higher up. I think because you don't know in certain areas, it's fair to have him at 6 right now. That's fair.
And Mike, the 5 guys that are going to be on my list ahead of him, I have way more confidence in all of their offensive coordinators compared to where Gunnar Stockton is going to be.
Agreed. But to your point, though, Brian, about the fit at quarterback, Jake Fromm and Stetson Bennett, those 2 guys were gamers. I mean, look, Jim Chaney was the offensive coordinator at Georgia when Jake Fromm exploded onto the scene in 2017. It wasn't, it wasn't Todd Monken. And so I agree with some of the issues of Mike Bobo and how he calls his offense. But I think sometimes when under Kirby's regime, when they don't have a 5-star caliber quarterback to rely on, and their hands are forced a little bit, that's kind of when Kirby Smart's coaching genius comes out. I mean, people forget Justin Fields was also at Georgia too. Highly touted recruit, never got onto the field. He transferred
except on a stupid fake punt in the SEC title game.
Yeah, that don't know where that one came from. Don't know where that one came from. But I think
second worst special teams call of the year. The other one being the fake punt that Nick Saban did against Clemson, where he freaking snapped the ball and gave it to his punter or his kicker to run through the line and get killed by Christian Wilkins.
Yeah.
Sorry. Continue, Trev.
No,
I'll never get over those 2 terrible special teams calls in big moments, but please continue.
No, you're spot on. Those were rough. But in Georgia's run, and it's been at the heels of gamer-like quarterbacks. And what I saw from Gunnar Stockton in the Sugar Bowl was a young kid with very little experience that did not flinch.
Yeah.
Georgia did not lose that game because of Gunnar Stockton. I'll tell you that right now. And that's where he earned my respect.
He should not have been asked to lead them down the field against Notre Dame with less than a minute left in the game and the half. More experience, I think he'll have more awareness of that pressure. But that was a high backside pressure. Most quarterbacks are not going to see that. Yes, his internal clock maybe in that situation should have been a little bit faster. That's where experience comes. But you don't put a kid like that when you're only down 6-3. You don't put a kid like in a situation like that in his first real start in the Sugar Bowl against the best pass defense in college football. You just don't do it. So to your point, that's not on Gunnar Stockton. And he was the reason it was even a game. I mean, some of the downfield throws he made, including the bomb that the one guy dropped.
Oh, yeah.
He threw some dimes in that game, but he also struggled against Notre Dame's pass defense at times, like a lot of quarterbacks, like C.J. Stroud struggled against Notre Dame's pass defense, like Drake May struggled against Notre Dame's pass defense. Caleb Williams struggled against Notre Dame's pass defense. There's been a lot of quarterbacks that you could say played worse than Gunnar Stockton, and it did not look as good as Gunnar Stockton did in the first quarter and a half of that game. And then once they fell behind, it was going to be tough for him to do what was needed to be done. I mean, he gets sacked in a 6-3 game. The next time Gunnar Stockton takes the field, it's 20-3. And you're not coming back from that. I don't care who was a quarterback. So I like him, but I do think that's a good point about Jim Chaney, but the offense also held them back prior to Todd Monken showing up as a team.
Very true.
But I just think you're going to be forced for them to go play Georgia football. I think they tried to get too cute the last couple years. And let's throw the ball around and let's do it. No, man, you're Georgia. You go bully the teams that you play, just like you did Texas. And I think Gunnar Stockton is the perfect player for that system. I don't know that Carson Beck, even if he's a legit top 5 quarterback, I don't know that he fits what Georgia's trying to do. That's more of what I'm trying to get at, where I think Gunnar Stockton absolutely does. Let's get into my top 5, fellas. And my number 5 guy, I have Austin Simmons from Ole Miss. Sean, you and I have talked a lot about Austin Simmons. I'm basing everything on one drive. My whole top – well, let me rephrase. There's 2 things I'm banking this on. Number 1 is that drive against Georgia was really impressive. I mean, just your starting quarterback throws a pick. He gets hurt. Georgia goes down and scores. And that kid came in, bad weather, and just dart, great pass, great ball, and touchdown, tie ball game, got all the momentum back. Now, Jackson Dart came back in, led them to the victory, but they don't win that game if he doesn't rally and respond the way that he did, in my opinion. I'm a big fan of Austin Simmons. I think he's the kid that also, I think, graduated high school like 2 years. He's going into his 3rd year at Georgia at Ole Miss. 3rd year at Ole Miss. He's already graduated from Ole Miss. He's going into his true junior season, and he's already graduated. This kid also graduated high school. I think it was like 2 years early. This is an incredibly smart young man. I think he shows some football smarts as well. I don't think he's an elite talent, but I think he's got enough talent, moxie, intelligence in a system run by Lane Kiffin and Charlie Weiss Jr. that I think this kid's going to be a really good college quarterback. Now, I don't know how sold Ole Miss is on him being great. That's why they went out and got some guys. But I think if they're able to have a little bit of patience with this kid, I think he's got a chance to be a really good quarterback. Really good quarterback.
Yeah, and as much as you want to, throw shade at his head coach, some is warranted. He can coach the quarterback position. And I think the promise, the talent, the gifts, everything you said, the drive he had against Georgia, that was very impressive. And yeah, I believe it wasn't like perfect conditions on that day as well. So he did it without
wet and rainy.
Yeah. So I would actually have him higher on my list, but
you had him third, Sean.
Yeah, I had him third on my list.
Yeah.
And that's because I think he's more of a known commodity.
Mm-hmm.
It's much more known than the others.
Yep.
That's why I had him pushed up. But yeah, I'm super excited to see how this kid develops throughout the season.
Well, Lane Kiffin's a lot like Lincoln Riley. I don't know how good of a head coach he is, but there's no questioning that he's a great offensive mind, and he knows how to develop quarterbacks. Like, that'll never – it's the same – like Trev and I – somebody asked it was a funny bias a whole, like, if we had to be stuck next to Lane Kiffin on a plane. Like, well, as long as he's want to talk ball, I think that'd be a great 3-hour plane ride, because, like, that guy's wicked smart when it comes to offensive football. I just don't think he's a great head coach. Lane Kiffin's the same way. Whatever you feel about him as a head coach, and he has limitations for a lot of reasons, there's no doubt that guy knows how to coach offensive football and knows how to develop quarterbacks. He turned Jackson Dart into a first-round pick. That's impressive. And Jackson had talent, but I don't know that Jackson came there from USC with that ability. So that's certainly a big part of it. So that's my number 5. Sean, you and I had the same top 5. We just had a different order. So feel free to talk about where you had guys specifically as we get up next to this list. My number 4 guy on this list is Julian Sand. I had a tough time with my 2, 3, and 4 of where to put guys, and I'll explain why I put him there. And I initially had Julian Sand 3rd. I moved him to 4th just because I feel like it's the experience thing for me. It kind of goes back to what you said, Sean. When I'm splitting hairs between him and my number 3, I've just seen my number 3 play a little bit more college football, and he's been in the system a little longer, and he's been in college a little bit longer, and I have just a little bit more faith in him. But I could easily see Julian Sand going way up this list because Julian Sand's really talented. I grade him as a top 50 quarterback coming out of high school, and he's an athletic kid. He's got some gunslinger to him. I think he's going to be the most mobile quarterback that Ohio State's had since JT back in 14 to 16, Sean. And And so I think that's part of his game I like. I think he brings that to the table in a way that I really think is going to benefit them. I'm sorry, Justin Fields. I keep forgetting about the Justin Fields era. Sorry. I don't know why I always forget about Justin Fields, because I still think of him as a Georgia guy. But him and Justin Fields are much more mobile than the guys around them. I'll say that. But I think he's got a live arm. He's got a little bit of gunslinger to him, which I think he'll need with this offense. My question is, it's the same thing that I have with some others. I hasn't played a lot of football, and neither is a couple other guys on this list. But I just think those other guys have a little bit more talent. But Sean, you and I had the same guys in 2 to 5, different order. You had Julian saying number 2, which I'll have you talk about in a second. But I just like the other guys a little bit better at number 2, and then my number 3. It is the experience thing. And that guy, and the thing I like about Julian saying is he's going to have a great talent to throw to, but so will my number 3 guy, so will my number 2 guys. So that doesn't quite separate it enough. And I have bigger question marks about Julian Sain's offensive line than I do about the other offensive lines, because they're relying on some portal guys, and they could end up having a really good offensive line, but it's just a little bit of a question mark. And I think the other 2 guys are going to have a little bit better running games to protect them. And that's a part of it as well. But it's splitting hairs with my 2 to 5. My 2 to 4. My 2 to 5. It's splitting hairs. And so I have Julian saying 4. Anyone's shade should be higher. I'm not going to argue with you. But I'll explain my reasons why other guys are higher. But I think Julian Sain is going to have a very good year for Ohio State. And he's the reason why, if it wasn't for his presence, I might have dropped Ohio State out of my preseason number 1, because I have you're the champs until somebody beats you, unless you go through an abnormal offseason like Michigan did in 2023, like LSU did in 2019. If they didn't have a guy like Julian Sain at quarterback, I might be more prone to say they lost too much. But I just think this kid, with his gunslinger mentality, having the players he's going to throw to, system's not changing, he's going to be a really, really good quarterback this year.
Yeah, I think we just look at track record. Like you said, you're splitting hairs with this top 4, and you're talking about lack of experience and not really a lot of sample size to look at. But I'm going to say, for me, and I've shared a little bit with you, Julian Sain is someone that I do have some inside information, like, okay, what's going on? How's he looking? And I can say this, his wide receivers love him. His wide receivers love him. So for me, that's why he got bumped up my list to number 2, because of that information that I have, that his wide receivers love him. I'm like, okay, I'm going to put him at 2. And so my expectations are, that of CJ Stroud, that in that system, because of the talent, there will be points, there will be production, but you will at the same time see the struggles. You will see the young the characteristically young turnovers and young mistakes. You're going to see that until he, eliminates those mistakes towards the end of the year. And I'm sure he'll be a much better quarterback and leader. But I do think, like you said, he benefits. And you mentioned that your 1, 2, and 3 have help as well. So, we're really just splitting hairs at this point. It's just the information that I have on him that allowed me to say, you know what, I'll put him at number 2, because I don't have as much information on the others.
So for me, Sean, when I look at my number 3 or my number 4 and my number 3, I think my number 4 guy, Julian Sain, is more talented than my number 3 guy, Ty Simpson. And I think Ty Simpson is going to win that Alabama job. If he doesn't, and it's Austin Mack, I would probably move Austin Mack down a little bit, even though I think Austin Mack is more talented. I think Julian Sain just has the experience advantage. Not that Julian Sain's played Ty Simpson has played a ton of football. He has played he's been a backup. He's never been the starter. This will be his first time starting for Alabama, but he's played a lot of football. And he's been a guy that's been around a long time, and he's now going. I think this is going to be his senior year in Alabama, I believe. Like, he'll be like a redshirt sophomore. I believe, he's going into the senior year. He was around in 2022, went 4 or 5 for 35 yards, went 11 of 20 for 179 yards, and rushed for 86 yards and 2 touchdowns in 2023. Last year, he went 14 of 25, 167 yards, rushed for 44 yards and a touchdown. So he's never been the guy. But he's been in college football now going on his 4th year. Like the other guys, he's going to have a very talented group around him. He's got a great quarterback's coach. And I know, like, you talk about the track record of Ryan Day. Well, the guy down in Tuscaloosa's got a pretty darn good track record as well with quarterbacks like Ty Simpson. And so I think he's going to be a much better fit for that system than what we saw last year. And when you talk about receiving cores, guys, Ohio State's got the number one receiving core in college football. I don't know that that's debatable. I don't think it's debatable. Alabama's really good as well. Not just because of Ryan Williams, and they got Jeremy Bernard coming back. But, Trev, how many times have you and I talked about how big of a pickup Isaiah Horton was?
Oh, yeah.
Ty Simpson is going to be by far the lowest NFL caliber player on this list. But as far as he's a coach's kid. His dad's, I think, a high school football coach. I think he was his high school football coach, if I remember correctly. Wicked smart kid. He's the perfect trigger man, in my opinion, for Kalen DeBoer's offense. And when you put the talent around him, have a pretty good offensive line, good run game, I think Ty Simpson's going to have a really good year for Alabama. Julian Saint's got more NFL potential, more upside, but there's also a lot of gap in between just time in college football and experience between the two. And that's why I have Ty Simpson third. And it's not like his talent around him is mediocre. You know what I'm saying? It's pretty good as well. So that's why, Trev, I have Ty Simpson number 3.
I get that completely. I mean, we've talked a lot about whatever quarterback is going to start down in Tuscaloosa this season, there's going to be a bump in production, specifically in the passing game. That, combined with them getting Grubbs back, their offensive coordinator, is going to be a huge move as well. But I like what Ty Simpson's going to be able to do in that offense. Whoever it is going to fit what Kalen DeBoer wants to do. You combine that with the talent they have on the perimeter. Yeah, I get that completely.
My number 2 guy, Sean, you had the Alabama winner 5, and
I had Alabama 5. Yeah.
If Austin Mack wins the job, I probably move him down to 5 because I think there's going to be more up and down. I think Austin Mack's very talented, but he's also very inexperienced, and so I see him moving around. But again, same top 5. It's splitting hairs a lot. My number 2 is whoever wins the battle at Notre Dame. I have CJ Carr projected to win that battle. The reason I have both of them on there is because I think CJ is going to win the battle, and I think CJ is going to have a great year. If Kenny Minchey starts at Notre Dame, barring injury, even if it's an injury, Kenny Minchey can be great at Notre If CJ doesn't get hurt and Kenny starts, what does that say about how good Kenny Minchey is going to be this year? And I think you talk about confidence around him. I've talked to a lot of people at Notre Dame, and they have very much a I don't care mentality about who starts the court. I mean, some guys have, I like CJ, I like Kenny, but there's a lot of, I like him, but. And either one of these 2 kids is going to step into a situation where you have arguably one of the best offensive lines in college football. You've got an offensive coordinator who has had great success with first-time starters and first-year starters. When you go back and look at the jump they made in year 2 of his system, but year 1 with Desmond Ridder as a redshirt freshman. You look at what he did with Malik Zaire and Deshaun Kaiser in 2015 at Notre Dame. And you look at just how good his offenses have been in year 2 with one of the best offensive lines in college football, with the best backfield in college football, and with a very underrated, in my opinion, top 10 receiving core around him, and they're great on defense. And so I think that the Notre Dame quarterback, combined with the fact those kids have a lot of talent, I have them number 2. I don't know that their production in the pass game is going to be good as 3 and 4, but I think playmaking ability, talent, and just ability to win games is every bit as good as those other guys. But since I ranked CJ higher than Julian coming out of high school, and I have no reason to change that now, they both have great talent around them. Notre Dame has a better backfield. Ohio State has a better receiving core. Notre Dame has a better offensive line. Ohio State has a deeper tight end room, a more proven tight end room. Notre Dame might have a more talented start. There's a lot of it's a wash debates when it comes to the talent around him. I just always had CJ higher than Julian saying. And that's really what it comes down to. And I think they're going to produce at a high level. But as I said before, a lot of this, Sean, is splitting hairs. I know you had them 4 in this conversation, but there's no doubt that whoever wins this job is going to be expected to be a big-time player, and I fully expect them to do just that.
Yeah, I had them at 4 because I felt like I had actually seen Austin Simmons, known commodity. Like, and I was comfortable with that.
Totally fair.
Absolutely. I had Julian saying because of information I received and the buzz that was coming when they were preparing for the playoffs. Like, there was buzz about what Julian saying was doing in playoff practices. You know, just like similar to what you heard about CJ Carr when he got on campus and he was practicing, you know,
and he's thrown 12
team.
passes.
Yeah.
We've actually seen him throw a pass in college football.
Yeah. So, you know, that's why I had those guys bumped up. They were 2 and 3 for me. And then I had Notre Dame at 4. And then I had the Alabama situation at 5.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
And here's the part that, well, let's talk about this after we're done here with this last part. But last one is Arch Manning, number 1. And I think here's a lot of reasons why Arch is number 1. I could argue that I like this guy a little bit more talented. I like this guy's a little bit more talented. They're all debatable. Arch coming out of high school, for me, was a top 50 caliber player. I always thought he, 5-star. I don't know about all that, but definitely top 50 caliber player. Had some things he needed to improve upon and work on. And I think going to Texas was one of the best things that Arch ever decided to do. Because what it allowed him to do is, if you guys think about how much hype he has gotten in the last 2 years as the backup, imagine what it would have been if he had to start somewhere as a true freshman or as a true sophomore. So I think going to Texas was a smart decision, on top of the fact that he's going to play for a great offensive mind in Steve Sarkisian. And that's the thing about 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. The one thing about all these kids they're all playing for great offensive coordinators. There's no doubt about that. Arch, the difference with Arch is it's the experience level. That's really what it comes down to for me. You talk, Sean, about, you've seen Austin Simmons play. You've seen Julian Sain play a little bit more than CJ Carr, Kenny Minchie. And that's all fine. And we can have these conversations about, I get that, but it's not that much more. 12 passes and mop-up duty doesn't mean a whole lot. I could easily say that. But you know what we've seen Arch do? We've seen Arch Manning start 2 football games. And we saw him have some good moments and some of the struggles in those moments. In a 3-game stretch last year against UTSA, where he came off the bench in mop-up duty, against Louisiana Monroe in his first career start, game they won 51-3, and then a start against Mississippi State. He threw for 223, 258, 325 yards, averaged over 10 yards an attempt, had 8 touchdowns and 2 picks. And Arch is also a very good runner. He ran for, 82 yards and 2 touchdowns in those 3 games. You saw late in the year, Texas was bringing him in short yardage situations and as a runner. And so I think when you look at the combination of talent and experience in playing for Steve Sarkisian, he's going to also have talent around him. And the fact that he's a year older than he is a year older than CJ and Julian Sain, and he's also more experienced than those guys. I think it's just that's why Arch is number 1. And I think he's my clear number 1 because of that experience. May not end the year number 1, but I think Arch is an outstanding quarterback. And I think he's going to have success there. I think people are putting too much hype on him to the point where, Sean, I get your thoughts on this. I said this to Trevor in a show, Trevor might have said it to me. I forget who said it to who. But unless they play for the title and he throws for 4,000 yards and is the Heisman finalist, it's almost like the hype is so great on Arch that anything less than that is going to be considered a disappointment. And that's kind of what we said. But I think if there's a kid that's built to handle that, I think it's Arch. And I just think he's kind of a whatever kind of kid, just he's got a lot of Eli in him, where he's just like, whatever, I don't care what you say about me. I'm just out here doing my thing, kind of lighthearted, kind of guy, plays a little bit kind of a gunslinger like Eli did. And he's an athletic guy. His dad went to Ole Miss as a scholarship wide receiver. I just think Arch is poised to be able to handle all that pressure and go out there and thrive and take away all the hype. I think he's a really good football player, and he's going to do very well in that system.
Yeah. You mentioned his uncle. And his uncle, you can say what you want to say. You can argue about whether or not he's a Hall of Famer. When it came to moments in the playoffs, he made the necessary play. That's all that matters. In 2 Super Bowls, he made the necessary throws and plays to beat Tom Brady. He went up to Lambeau Field 2 times. He beat Brett Favre 1 time, beat Aaron Rodgers the other time. He did what he had to do to make the necessary
what did he
plays
say,
to
Sean?
win games.
What did he say? Tom Brady's the GOAT. He's nice. Psych, I beat him twice. You know what I mean? You ever see that thing that he did? It's facts. Facts.
The same thing that you can say is pressure, he could look at it as a blessing, because he could look at this and say, what surrounds me has gotten us to the playoffs in the Final Four. All I have to do now is make one or two plays. I have to be the difference maker. What Quinn wasn't able to do, I feel like I can do. I can make the play with my legs. I can make it with my arms. And if he has that confidence, and he knows what Sark, and look, Sark is one of the best offensive minds and developers of quarterbacks. So Sark's going to have him ready to play, especially when they go up to the horseshoe, and he's going to have him in a position to make the plays. He's definitely going to put him in the right plays, the right position. He's going to manage the game for him and bring him along. So I think he's in a very advantageous situation. He has more experience. He started more games. Did he look feeble in certain spots? Certain spots, he'll have a good play against Georgia, and then the next play, he's just getting chased down by a heat-seeking missile at linebacker for Georgia when he's trying to get outside the pocket. So he has a little bit more. I'll say it like this. I thought what the old ball coach, threw out there concerning Arch Manning was a little bit of a low blow, right? Because, the transitive property of, you had a 7th round pick in front of you. No, what you had was a leader of a program. You had a kid that was a leader of the program, and the head coach decided to go with the known commodity instead of forcing his team to have to adjust to another voice. That was not a talent issue. That's not saying that Arch wasn't talented enough to beat out Quinn Ewers. That was Steve Sarkisian looking at the situation and said, you know what? I'm going to go with the guy that we have in place. Because he could have chosen to go with Arch and still gotten to the playoffs in the Final Four, in my opinion. I don't think it was a talent issue, because I think Arch could have come in and played well, given the opportunity. So, I think people are just taking unnecessary shots. Maybe it's the name attached to him. Brian, you and I were both, when he was coming out, we felt like, all right, he's getting an extra bump. If we sit here and watch the film, he's not really he hasn't shown on film where they're ranking him. So maybe he is getting a little extra bump from the name and the attention. That's fine and dandy. But right now he's at a point where, he just has to go on the field and show it. There's really nothing else to say.
Because there's two types of overrated, Sean. There's overrated that says you're not very good, but everybody says you are. And then there's overrated where I think you're really good, I just don't think you're number one. If Trevor, if you say, okay, Penn State's my number one team in the country, and I have them 5, I can say, I think you're overrating Penn State. Doesn't mean I think they suck and they shouldn't belong in the top 25, right? And that's how I felt about Arch. I thought he got the bump in that he was a top 5 player. Some people had him number 1. I didn't think he was that. I thought his game was a little raw. He was he wasn't like Peyton. He was more like Eli. Eli, remember, redshirted as a freshman at Ole Miss and, needed to improve his accuracy and decision-making. I remember watching Keon Keeley just eat his lunch in a game when he was a junior. And I said, boy, he's got a lot of tools, but the talent was always there. I had him as a top 50 player. That's still really good. Really good. And now he's a junior. And I think he's going to be pretty good. I just think people are putting way too much on this kid, like number 1 overall draft pick. And maybe he turns out to be that. He could turn out – he's a Manning. The track record of being the number 1 draft pick is pretty good for Manning quarterbacks. Aren't they batting 1,000? Wasn't Archie also the number 1 overall pick in the draft, I believe? Let me look this up real quick. I thought Archie was also number 1. Yeah, no, he's a number 2 pick. So the lowest drafted Manning quarterback out of 3 is number 2 overall. That's Papa. Now you got the 2 sons. Now you got one of the grandkids. He's a talented quarterback, and I think people are just put too much on him too early. Just let the kid go play. But like the others guys, he's going to have a pretty good supporting cast around him. If he wasn't as experienced as he was, the one thing that would have given me pause, I do have questions about Texas's offensive line. That is the one thing that gives me pause, but his experience gap is such that I don't think it's enough to overcome for the other guys in the ranking process. That's
Well,
where I'm at.
I think the thing that gets overlooked way too much with Arch Manning is he was a redshirt freshman last year. Like maybe there were just situations that he wasn't ready to play in yet. I'm sympathetic to that fact. I think people get tied up into his last name's Manning. Agreed. And this isn't Peyton Manning from the 90s that's sitting behind Quinn Ewers.
Right.
It's a redshirt freshman. Yes, some of his performance in meaningful minutes, I'll give it to him. You know, he played against Georgia. I mean, against Ohio State, he played all snap. Against Georgia in the SEC championship game, he played 2 snaps. You know, against Clemson, he played 4 snaps. And so he has meaningful experience in big games, but they brought him in to run the ball on 3rd down. And I think too many people saw that and were like, well, why didn't Quinn Ewers get benched for Arch Manning down the stretch? It's like, because Arch Manning has 2 starts under his belt. One of them is against Louisiana Monroe, and the other one is against Mississippi State,
Right.
who was by far the worst team in the SEC last year.
Right.
And so there needs to be some sort of like middle ground. If Arch Manning was the quarterback, and again, we're playing the what if scenario here, but I don't know if Arch Manning, if he was the starting quarterback against Ohio State, Steve Sarkisian doesn't call a toss play on 3rd and goal from the 3-yard line. I don't know if that happens or
Do
not.
they beat Arizona State with Arch? You know, when they go to overtime, we don't know those things.
Exactly.
But, you know, like to your point, Trev, I don't know how good of a head coach Steve Sarkisian is, but the one thing I'm rarely going to doubt him on is if he thinks there's a reason why he plays a kid, then he's going to play that kid.
Yeah.
And if his name wasn't Arch Manning, I don't think we have this. Like if CJ Carr would have gone to Texas, and and I use him as an example because he gets a lot of hype because of who his last name. It's not like the Manning one. I don't think there's the same call for Quinn Ewers to be benched his freshman year the way there was for Quinn Ewers and Arch Manning. But that's not Arch's fault. What we can say about Arch is he's a talented kid. He's a dual threat quarterback. He's got some moxie to him. He's got some all shucks, I don't really care to him. And he's a talented kid, and he's going to play for a great offensive mind. And that's what makes it. And here's kind of my final point, and we'll talk about a couple because we like Trev. We had a list of top 10 quarterbacks, and only one of these guys was on there, and that's Arch. Actually, do we have Arch on there? I don't know that I had Arch on mine. I didn't have him on my top 10 quarterbacks. I don't think you did either. But because I need to see it with him. I need to see it with CJ and Kenny. I need to see it with Ty Simpson. I need to see it with Julian Sain and Austin Simmons. Will you guys be shocked if by the end of the year, all 5 of these kids are in the top 10 quarterbacks of college football? I won't.
No. Well, and that was a disclaimer that we put out when we released our top 10 quarterbacks list is, hey, this list is very subject to change because the highest ceiling kids, per our criteria, we couldn't even list.
We didn't have DJ Lagway on our list either, who could be in that conversation when it's all said and done.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. What about you, Sean? What are your thoughts?
I'm going to go ahead and say 3 of the 5 that are not Arch Manning. 3 of the 4 that are not Arch Manning on this list will be in the top 10.
Yeah. It's a good bet.
Yeah.
And I think you could look at this.
I feel
list
good
right
about that.
You could look at this right here too, Sean, and say like, maybe Gunnar Stockton's in there by the end of the year too.
Yeah.
So,
well, I mean, the Syracuse quarterback, just because of the system, will have numbers.
Right. Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, before we wrap this up, guys, I did want to talk about a couple other guys we had on our list, Sean. I know there were some guys you had on your list that kind of weren't in our IB top 10. I'll talk about them. And then a couple other guys I considered, Trev, maybe a couple that you have on your mind. One guy that we didn't consider for the list, I didn't consider my list, is just because I don't know that he's going to start the season as a starter, is Bryce Underwood. And I just think Michigan is going to do with him, and I think they should do with him, what Clemson did with Trevor Lawrence, which is bring him along gradually. Let the other kids start, take the arrows, bring him in sort of a, third series, give him a chance, then bring him off, take the pressure off of him. And then by game 5 of Trevor's freshman year, they turned the keys over to him. And then the rest is history for them. I would do something like that with Bryce. But it could just get to the point where in fall camp, he's just so good that you just have to play him over Mikey Keene. I just think the ideal scenario is you take you got to know your roster well enough. Guys, we're not winning a national championship this year. So, but we can win one with Bryce. So we got to make sure we handle that foundation of what we do for him the right way, and not put him in a position where he gets overwhelmed with not a great team around him, high expectations in game one. I don't know that I want his second career start to be in Norman, Oklahoma. You know what I'm saying? Like, let Mikey Keene take those arrows, and then you can kind of bring him in the third or fourth series, and then if he gets hot, you ride him and go with it. So that's why I don't have him in my top 10. But if he starts day one, he'll most likely be top 10. The other thing that concerns me about Bryce is I just don't like the talent around him at Michigan. Like, the supporting cast in the pass game is not going to be that good. It might be a little bit better than last year, but it's not going to be great. And that's a big – I mean, you look at some of the guys that, like, these other guys – I mean, I would argue I would take Minnesota's receiving core right now over Michigan, Sean. Like, you mentioned Minnesota. Would you trade – if you were Minnesota, would you trade your receiving core for Michigan's? I wouldn't. Maybe Purdue would, but, I mean, we'll see. But he was one that I didn't consider. Sean, I know you thought about him in yours, but I just – because I don't know he's going to be the starter day one is why I left him off. And I hope that Michigan handles him correctly, because I hate when coaches ruin talented young quarterbacks. Like I've said this, if David Carr would have gone somewhere other than Houston, I think he would have had a good NFL career. But you can't throw a kid into a franchise situation. He gets like sacked 70 times his rookie year and expect him to just mentally be with it the rest of his career. And we've seen that before. And that's why I hope Michigan handles Bryce Underwood correctly, because if they handle him correctly, I think and as long as he works, he's going to be a star. He's got unbelievable talent. There's no doubt about it.
I will say that I do trust Sharon more in one or two instances, or both instances, actually. I do trust that he's going to do exactly what you said. And I do trust that when he does get in, he has shown that he will lean on the run game. He will lean on the run game and will not ask this kid, or will not put more on his shoulders than he can bear. Like, I trust him to do that. I trust him to do that. Yeah. Yeah. So I think they're going to develop him right. I do think he's going to be a superstar. And then one of the other names that we talked about because of recent events that have taken place out in Provo is Jake Retzlaff, who looks like he's going to be transferring from the program because of a possible suspension. And that opens the door for a new starter for BYU, and a name that is very familiar to Notre Dame fans because he was recruited by Notre Dame, and that's quarterback Bear Bachmeier. So, we might be watching him as a first-time starter at BYU. So, that's someone that recently, within the last 24 hours, jumps on this list and didn't make the top 10, but that's somebody to discuss. And then because of the parameters, we weren't able to mention guys like Dante Moore and Marcel Reed that, took over for guys last year, but this is their first time as a full-time starter coming into this year. So, but yeah, it's an interesting conversation.
Sean, I am so pissed to myself right now.
What's up?
I completely forgot a guy that would be in my top 5. Completely forgot about Andrew. You know who just reminded me of him? Andrew Gilmore.
Well, see, I
forgot Damon Williams.
He played last year,
but he started the last 2 games.
Yeah, that's why I didn't put him on my list, because I asked you about the parameters.
Yeah, but he only started the 2 games.
Okay. Right. That's the only reason I didn't put him on the list, because he started games last year.
He would
have been in my top 5 easily.
Because Arch started 2 games last year.
That's true.
I completely forgot about he'd be my 5.
He was
my 5.
He was the first name that I wrote down to ask you guys when you were done with the segment, when you sent me over your list. And then I was like, you have Bo Prabula in this list and not Damon Williams? I was like, okay.
Yeah. Stupid.
Like, okay.
Stupid.
Yeah, see, Brian talked me out of him. When he
I didn't, but you never asked me about him. I just gave you criteria.
Specifically asked you about him. But once I put Dante out there, and you said, because I said the starts at UCLA.
Yeah, but Dante started like half the year.
He started 4 games. And then
he played like half, and then he got hurt, and then he came back and started another game against Cal late in the year.
Yeah.
But yeah, Damon Williams would have fit on the criteria. And if I hadn't just completely like I have him on my big list right here. I have this big list right here but then I didn't translate him into my top 10. just a complete oversight. Dynamic player, threw for over 300 yards in the bowl game against Louisville. Yeah. He'll run for 500-600 yards this year. Short, doesn't fit the prototype, but he's in a system where you look what Noah Fafita did for Arizona 2 years ago. This kid's a better talent than Noah Fafita. So, Andrew, thank you for reminding me of that. I complete 100% oversight. No, well, here's my questions about Damon. No, you guys know if I would remembered that, I would have had him over Bo Prabula on my list. Yes, I like Trevor. Like you had Bo Prabula over Damon.
I was like, okay. I was like, I'm interested to see where this goes.
I thought I respected my boss. Second guessing that a little bit now.
Because really, the only, I guess, everybody else was Arch the only one that started multiple games on the list. Because Austin Simmons didn't start, Julian Sayin didn't start. Arch was the only one that. I believe
Steve started a game.
Steve started a game.
Ryan Brown started against Illinois, correct?
Yes, he did. One game. No, he started two. He started
against Oregon. Yeah. And that was injury related. And then Bo has not started a game, and Drake Lindsay has not started a game.
No.
But just an oversight, Trev. Absolute oversight. Who else you got?
So the only other one, and I feel like I know the answer to this, but just wanted to clarify, the quarterback competition going on at Boston College.
Yeah.
If we would have known it was Dylan Lonergan, would he have made the list?
Yes, he would have.
Probably.
But because it's up in the air between Grayson James or Dylan Lonergan. Okay.
I don't have and Grayson James played enough last year that I wouldn't have him on my list.
Okay.
Because he replaced Thomas Castellanos last year as a starter, and he started the last 4 games of the year. I think he had 5 starts last year. And it wasn't a Thomas Castellanos got injured and he stepped in. You could, if you wanted to count Grayson James, you could. He also, even if he counted him, I probably still don't put him on my list. He's a nice quarterback, but that's it.
Yeah.
If Dylan Lonergan had won the job from him, then I'd say, throw Dylan Lonergan on that list. He'd probably be my number 10. Because I'd still have some questions about Dylan Lonergan. Like he's got some things he's got to prove to me, and he hasn't really played a whole lot, and he couldn't pass Ty Simpson and those kind of things. But he's got a big arm.
Yeah.
If he won the job, and that's why I couldn't even do it as the winner of the BC battle, because I'm like, if you're not good enough to pass up Grayson James just yet, are you going to tap into your full potential? But if he just went out and like, okay, I think he's going to win the job. And I reached out to a BC guy today, asked him what was going on. He goes, it's a legitimate battle. They don't know who's going to start.
Okay.
So that's why he's off my list.
Okay. Fair enough. Yeah. I forgot that Grayson James started a little bit last year too. Had to relieve Thomas Castellanos from dicing up the ACC apparently.
I looked at Devin Brown from Cal. And I did not go with him because I just was not impressed by him. I thought he was overrated coming out of high school, and I was not impressed by him in his limited minutes at Ohio State as a thrower. Thought he really struggled against Missouri when he came to that game. He's got a lot to prove to me, and he's also replacing the entire skill positions that they had at Cal last year. Like, not impressed with him, situation around him. If Elijah Brown, I'm curious to see what happens with him at Stanford. He's a kid that I got my eye on playing for Frank Richt. He's going to have a decent running back room. Don't know about the receiving core. O-line could be a mess, but I like Elijah Brown. Here's a kid that I really like, guys. It's never played a down of football that I like a lot. And that's a redshirt freshman at Oklahoma State named Zane Flores. If you go, I think he led his team to a state title. They might have lost the title game, but under 3-star kid, nobody knew about him. Went back and watched this. He beat out some older guys to win the starting job at Oklahoma State this spring. Big arm kid, gunslinger, a little bit of a gunslinger. He's the type of guy that's really thrived under Mike Gundy. I couldn't put him in there because I just know I don't know what he's going to do. I don't love the town around him, but he's a guy that keep an eye on that. If they can put a good system around him, I could see Zane Flores end up being a really good quarterback in his career. I don't know about year one, but there's going to come a time, I will be one to bet, that when we're doing our preseason top 10 quarterback lists, we're going to be talking about Zane Flores. But I just need to see a little something from him. But he's a kid that I'm very intrigued by. He's from, I think, Nebraska. Just small school Nebraska. And you watch him, there's a play, he drops back, he's about to get hit, and he launches the ball, hits the guy in stride about 60 yards down the field. Just boom, over the top on a post route. I'm like, okay. But he's like this real skinny kid. He's like a $180. Looked like he was about a $185, $190. But, he's filled out at there, and I think he's a really good football player. Really good football player. So he was another guy on my list. Anybody else that you guys kind of thought of and looked at as potential guys on your list?
My questions have been answered.
It's going to be a fun year, guys. It's going to be a really fun year. It's going to be a good quarterback year. Really good quarterback year.
I do. Outliers because they started multiple games, but like DJ Lagway and the CJ Bailey from North Carolina. He
threw for over 2,000 yards last year, so that's why he didn't.
I think the sky's the limit for both of those kids. I'm looking forward to their first full season as a starter. It's kind of because they go into the all season as a starter, they don't have to battle. I think Julian's saying, who on this list, if you guys have it in front of you, who on this list other than Alabama and Notre Dame actually had a battle?
Syracuse is going to have one.
In Syracuse, right?
Yeah.
Are those only three?
Minnesota had one.
They had
Drake
one.
Lindsey won. Georgia, no. Purdue, no. Ole Miss, no.
No.
They might have one, though, because they went out and got a couple portal guys. They got the guy from Ferris State. But, yeah, Notre Dame, Alabama are having one. Syracuse is having one, and Minnesota had one.
Okay.
And Drake Lindsey won it. And that's why one of the reasons Zach Pyron left. Yeah.
I'll say this about other quarterbacks.
Ohio State. Ohio State's another one.
Yeah.
Ohio State had a battle.
Really had one?
Yeah. I mean, if Taven St. Clair would have outplayed Julian Sand, there's a chance he could have been the guy. And I don't think the kid from Idaho was ever going to start over him, but I do think if Taven St. Clair would have come in, I think he would have had a shot to – like if put it like this, he was given the opportunity to outplay Julian Sand, and he just didn't. I've talked to a couple of Ohio State people. They say that
I guess from that
now he just
standpoint,
Julian.
Yeah.
What I was told is Julian thoroughly outplayed him.
Yeah.
Like so, you could say there wasn't a battle, Sean, in that the way that you also said Steve Angeli had no chance starting Notre Dame. Because your point about when you said the one time, because I think some people misunderstood you. You said he had no opportunity to start Notre Dame, and your comment wasn't that he wasn't given an opportunity. It's his talent was not going to afford him the opportunity to beat out those other two kids. Am I correct in kind of relaying?
No, I said he didn't have a shot. You can take it out. You want to say he didn't have a shot against those. He
wasn't
two kids.
going to beat those kids out. Not that the Notre Dame coaches didn't give him a shot, and that's kind of how it was at Ohio State.
And that's what I'm saying about the Ohio State situation. Yeah,
but he got outplayed.
Yeah.
So like Steve was given the opportunity to go battle those guys, but he had no shot to do it. Yeah. And that's how I took from some people I've talked to around the Ohio State program. That's how the battle was Ohio State. If those other two kids would have outplayed Julian Sand, they would have had a shot, but they didn't. And so I do think he won the job. And I don't know that there was any doubt he was going to win the job. I just think I do think there was a battle. And I think you needed to do that too, Sean, because you needed to see Julian compete. You needed to see him feel like, hey, you better go out there and perform or you're not going to go play. And so I think he's a guy that has a chance to be the player.
That's fair.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's fair.
Because, Sean, I think there's a difference between saying nobody was going to beat that guy out and saying there wasn't at least a competition for it.
Yeah.
And like if Taven St. Clair, who's a 5-star recruit, would have come in and just outplayed Julian Sand all spring, you don't think he would have got a shot to start? I think he would have.
Yeah.
I just don't think he was going to come in and outplay Julian Sand all spring. That's where I'm coming from.
I think everybody's different, right? Everybody's different. We've had quarterback battles, as I use the air quotes, at Notre Dame, where we have to sit back and really ask if they were really battles.
Right.
I mean,
like
they said it was
Tyler Buckner versus Jack Cohn.
Heck, Riley Leonard supposedly was in a quarterback battle in the spring.
Right.
And it's like,
In the
Come
fall,
on,
in
man.
fall camp, yeah.
In fall camp, yeah. I mean, it's like,
Okay.
all right.
Tyler Buckner and Drew Pine. Okay. Sure. Quarterback competition. Yeah. Right. Right. I think the most legitimate of the quarterback battles that is going on right now, I would argue, is the Notre Dame and Alabama ones.
Yeah.
The Syracuse one hasn't happened yet. That's not going to happen until fall camp. I'm talking about the ones that have been going on. I think those are the two that where I don't know, like it was not certain who was going to win that job coming into the battle. I think the Ohio State one is, I think everybody assumed it was going to be Julian, but other guys were given an opportunity. And with Alabama, it's Ty Simpson, it's Austin Mack, and it's Keelan Russell also in the spring as part of that too. And then, of course, Notre Dame had a 3-man battle as well. So it's going to be fascinating. Any other quarterback, Sean, that you contemplated for this list? I mean, it really just came down to the criteria, because if we expanded the criteria to guys that, like haven't started more than 5 or 6 games, and all of a sudden we can add some more guys into that conversation. We could have added Dante into that conversation a little bit. But that's also what makes what I'm excited. I mean, there's a guy that if he wins the battle at Maryland, I've talked about Justin Martin. If he can win that job, what kind of year 2 breakout does Aiden Childs have at Michigan State? Like, I really think this is going to be a great year quarterback. It's going to be a fun. We're going to look like, dude, college football is in a great position at quarterback for the next couple of years because of just this young talent in the freshman, sophomore class, especially, that's ascending this season. And then a couple juniors like Aiden Childs, Arch Manning, some of those guys. I think this is going to be a really fun year. If you like quarterback play, it's going to be a fun year. It's also why I think offensive play overall was down last year, because there weren't a lot of great quarterbacks. I think offensive play is going to be up again this year, because especially by the time we get late in the season, quarterback play.
I think the jump in quarterback play is going to make the playoffs a little bit more competitive too. I mean, the playoffs were already competitive last year, but think about it. I mean, of all the quarterbacks that were drafted, the first quarterback that played in the playoffs that got drafted was later. He was like the 94th pick. It was Dylan Gabriel. Then after that, it was only 2 other ones, and Riley Leonard and Quinn Ewers.
Because Curtis Rourke wasn't drafted, right?
I don't.
Yeah, I don't think he was drafted. No, I think you're correct.
And if he was, it was late.
Yeah,
and so
he was a 7th round pick, number 227.
Okay.
So it was like you said, Trev. It was that point in time where we're not paying attention to the NFL draft order anymore. Correct.
And so we're talking about a year where out of 12 playoff teams, only 4 of them got drafted, and the highest prospects weren't even sniffing the playoffs. Maybe a little harsh on Miami. Miami, for the majority of the season, were sniffing the playoffs until they completely fell off. The wheels.
Right. But that was always going to happen.
Sure. But then, everybody's talking about Shedeur Sanders, and some of the highest touted draft picks of this upcoming season weren't close to making the playoffs. So, I think of playoff contending teams and who I have in my bracket, I think over the majority have new starting quarterbacks.
To your point, Trev, 5 playoff quarterbacks last year were drafted. Gabriel was a 3rd rounder. The next 4 were 2 6ths and 2 7ths.
Mm-hmm.
So, now there's some guys that could maybe get drafted this upcoming year, but they were, some of them were younger guys and things like that. So I just think overall quarterback play is going to be much improved in college football this year. And then part of it too is there was a lot of first-year starters last year.
Yeah.
That people don't know about that are going to be poised, like Josh Hoover from TCU, Spencer Robertson from Baylor. A lot of those guys who were good first-year starters last year that I think are going to take jumps this year.
Yeah.
And I think it's just going to make for a really fun year in college football. It really, especially if you're someone who likes offense. If you're someone who likes defense, this may not be as much of a fun year for you, because there's some really good receiving corps and some really good quarterbacks in college football this year,
and really good offensive lines.
Yeah. And sometimes there's some teams that have all of those together, and I think this year's playoff is going to look a lot more like some of the past years, where if you want to win it, you've got to score 30, 40 points.
Yeah, I think this is a year where quarterbacks are in really good situations. I look around, I don't know if I see a guy that's get on my back and let me carry you. And this quarterback group, like, you guys correct me if I'm wrong, like, who is that guy that, everything else around me is not up to par that I'll
like
put
who's
on my
proven that? Like who's proven that?
No, who do you think can do that, or up to this point has proven that?
Yeah,
or
the
that
proven
you even
part.
project.
Sean, who do we have as our top quarterbacks when we did the returners? It was Cade Klubnik, who only did that to a degree. He did it against Pitt, against SMU. He didn't do it against Texas.
Right.
You know, it's Drew Aller. He's not that guy.
Nah, he's not
it's
that
Josh
guy.
Hoover, who I love, but he's not that guy.
Yeah.
He's a great system guy. I
Yeah.
mean, it's look, the only guy that has shown it at all is, you could argue, is like Lenore Sellers, who at time, but he's got to be way more consistent with it.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, you look at the battle he had against Cade Klubnik. He's the one that said, hey, I'm going to go win this thing. Yeah. And now I do think there's a lot, but see, that's what's different from the younger quarterbacks that aren't. I think Dante Moore has that ability as a passer. I think DJ Lagway has that ability. I think Arch has that ability. I think CJ Carr has that ability. I think Kenny Minchie has that ability. I think there's guys on this list that have that ability. Some of the younger quarterbacks, but as far as like the veteran quarterbacks, they're not those. Like Drew Aller I think gets way too much crap from some, and I think he gets overhyped by others because he's not a put the team on my shoulders in a big moment and I'm going to lead you to victory guy. He's a guy that you want him if you've got a really good situation around him.
Yeah.
But I think when I look at the younger quarterbacks, I think DJ Lagway can be that type of quarterback.
Yeah, that's fair.
I think Arch Manning can be that type of quarterback. I think CJ and Kenny both have that ability, especially, in my opinion, CJ. I think there's some of those younger guys. Now, Dante is that way as a thrower. Where Dante loses me with some of the other guys is he doesn't have the running and athleticism of even a CJ and guys like that. So that's where he loses me. Lenore Sellers has that type of ability. If Garrett Nussmeier can be a better decision maker, he has some of that ability because he can just make ridiculous throws. So, but those guys weren't those guys last year.
Yeah.
Like really, like Cam Ward was that way because if you take Cam Ward off Miami, they're 8-4, 7-5.
Yeah.
And Riley Leonard was that way.
For Notre Dame. Yep.
There's going to be a lot more of those guys. Damon Williams is a guy that can be that way. He hasn't shown it yet, but like you go back and watch the bowl game, that was a close game because of Damon Williams.
Yeah.
You know, and that Louisville defense had no answers for that kid.
Yeah.
It's just that their defense was even worse. You know, the Washington defense was even worse in that game. So. But that's what I think is going to make this year fun, Sean, is there's not a lot of proven quarterbacks that can do that have done that. But there's a lot of young, unproven quarterbacks that Avery Johnson is another one from Kansas State. Jalen Daniels from Kansas is a guy like that if he can stay healthy.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's a lot of that potential this year. Those guys just have to prove it. And I think that's what we're waiting on from this group. But it's going to be a fun year. I'm looking forward to it. That's one of the reasons I'm excited about the season.